Mike Wallace has been disqualified from attempting the 2025 Daytona 500 with MBM Motorsports, and Kurt Busch has been medically cleared to return to racing in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Justin Allgaier's 2025 brand scheme that will see majority races in 2025. Scheme looks very similar to the last couple years, but it really never needed to be changed. I've always been a big fan of the brand scheme. This one looks really, really good. Junior Motorsports absolutely knocked it out of the park. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this season. The next paint scheme you're taking a look at is Ros Chen's 2025 Busch Beer paint scheme. I really like this a lot. There's been some differences in one. Wendy's is no longer on the side of the car, but Wendy's won't be associated with Chastain, as they'll be, of course, associated with Helio Castroneves and Shane Van Gisbergen. It does look solid, though. Looking forward to see on the racetrack this upcoming season. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sam Mayer's 2025 Auto Bowl scheme that we'll see in quite a few races in 2025. This is the first sponsor that Sam Mayer has also for the 2025 season as a new sponsor for him in the Haas factory team this year. I think it looks all right in my opinion. Really cool to see that Sam Mayer does have a new sponsor for this upcoming year, and looking forward to seeing on the racetrack in 2025. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Bristol Xfinity Series race in the spring. As they have a title sponsor for the event, it's going to be called the SciAps 300. SciAps is an association, of course, with Ryan Segan, RSS Racing, and Matt DiBenedetto and Viking Motorsports, and they're going to be part of this event as well. I think it's a really solid sponsorship. Pretty cool. The SciAps is expanding their sponsorship for 2025. I'm glad to see that they'll be sponsoring the race at Bristol in the spring in 2025. Good to see them doing that this upcoming year at Bristol. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ed Carpenter Racing. As it was announced earlier this afternoon that Ed Carpenter Racing has officially unveiled a new logo for 2025. They've had a really cool logo over the course of their years as an organization and team, but they've kind of simplified the logo for this year. I gotta say, I am not a big fan of this scheme or logo. It just looks way too clunky for me. I don't like the clunkiness of it. It doesn't look good. It looks very plain. It looks like Photoshop, and it doesn't look good in my opinion. Of course, Ed Carpenter Racing is going to be a 3-car team for the Indy 500. They're also going to have 3 cars this year at points, and I think it's cool that Ed Carpenter is trying to change things up for 2025, especially with Splenda coming in and sponsoring them, which is a big reason Alexander Rossi's over there for this upcoming year. But personally, I'm not a big fan of this logo. I just think that's really clunky, and it's very, very messy. Not the biggest fan of it overall, in my honest opinion. Just not a big fan of it. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about David Malukas. As it was confirmed earlier this morning that Dave Malukas will drive the number 4 for AJ Foy Racing in 2025. Many years, AJ Foy Racing has had the number 4 car, but in 2024, they did not have it because Kyffin Simpson was driving the number 4. Both the number 4 being available, as of course Chip Ganassi Racing is downsized into a 3-car operation, and Kyffin Simpson moving over to number 8 this upcoming year. The number 4 became available once again. And Dave Malukas, of course, we already knew was going to be joining up with AJ Foy Racing in 2025. I really think that Dave Malukas is going to be a really good driver this year. I think Malukas is one of the most underrated drivers in IndyCar, and he's on the horizon at Team Penske. Team Penske really likes him, and depending on what happens to the contracts of Will Power and Scott McLaughlin, he could potentially head over to Team Penske in the next couple of years. Of course, we know AJ Foy has a really big technical alliance with Team Penske, which is why we're talking about this. I think the number font does look really cool, and pretty cool to see that iconic number for the AJ Foy Racing team for many years is going to be back with AJ Foy Racing in 2025. I don't think Santino Ferrucci's number has been officially announced, but we're thinking the number for Santino is going to be 14 like it's been for a long time. So I think Ferrucci will be in the 14 and Dave Malukas will be in the number 4 once again in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Race of Champions. As earlier tonight, the Race of Champions, the invitational event at the Chillieville Nationals on Monday took place. And Christopher Bell started on the pole, drew the pole position after qualifying took place, and Christopher Bell pretty much dominated and led every single lap and won the Race of Champions. This will guarantee Christopher Bell in the A main, regardless if he makes it in from his qualifying time or makes it through the qualifying races and wins his A main later this week, which I think he's racing on Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm pretty sure. Or if he's able to make it in, if he doesn't make it in, he can use a provisional to be locked into the A main. Christopher Bell's on a roll in dirt. He, of course, won the big wing feature for the Tulsa Shootout, and now he's got to win in the Race of Champions. Christopher Bell is probably the favorite right now to go and win the Chili Bowl right now. I know Kyle Larson has shown some really good speed, and he has a chance to win the A main coming up here very, very shortly in the Chili Bowl, in which if he ends up winning, he'll be locked into the A main for the feature on Saturday night. But Christopher Bell, regardless of what happens, if he gets into provisional, I think he'll be starting in last in 24 position, because 24 cars get their way in to the Chili Bowl regardless. So congratulations to Christopher Bell, and good to see him win the Race of Champions Invitational. He beat people like Dason Pursley, Corey Day, Kaylee Lee Bryson, Tanner Thorson, Justin Grant, Kyle Larson, Buddy Kofoid, and Corey Day, among other big names that were in the event. Congratulations to Christopher Bell on winning the Race of Champions, a well-deserved win for Christopher Bell. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Philipe Jovic. As it was announced earlier this morning that Philipe Jovic will officially return as the test and reserve driver for Aston Martin in 2025. Philipe Jovic has been one of the best up-and-coming talents in motorsports, especially in the Formula One ranks, but unfortunately, because there's not a lot of money in his pocket right now, he's not been able to get a full funding ride for 2025, and has been the test and reserve driver for the Aston Martin team for the last couple of years. I would really long-term love to see Philippe get a chance and opportunity to go full-time in Formula One, but the problem is that Aston Martin has a driver named Lance Stroll, whose father owns a company, that being Lawrence Stroll, which is why Philippe can't go full-time with Aston Martin. But if someone ends up getting sick or injured like Fernando Alonso, or if Lance ends up having issues as well, Philippe will be there to be the reserve driver once again. Philippe is still looking to make his debut in Formula One. At this point, he's never made a start. I would love to see him get a chance and opportunity. He's going to do some FP1 sessions with the team and do some testing, which I think will be able to help the program out. Aston Martin's also done a lot of reshuffling for the 2025 year, which I think will help the team also in a pretty big way with the reshuffling of some people. Andy Cowell's gone in as a CEO and team principal of the company now, so we'll see what happens. But Philipe Jovic, like I said, will be the test and reserve driver for the team in 2025. I think it'll be a big benefit, and I think it'll bring a lot to the table for the team in 2025. Glad to see him back with the team in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, earlier tonight, the first prelim night officially concluded from the Chili Bowl Nationals. And Kyle Larson, after struggling a little bit in the beginning of his A main, moved his way up to the front, had a few cautions get back up to the front, but was able to pass Shane Golobic late in the event and was able to come off the corner and pick up the win on prelim night number 1 on Monday. This will guarantee Kyle Larson in to the A main on Saturday evening, and will be going for the pole dash as well. Congratulations to Kyle Larson on picking up the win. Kyle Larson, and halfway through the main, I didn't think he was going to have a chance and opportunity to go out there and get the win. But for him to be able to pick up the win in the victory, he just continues to prove why he's one of the best in the world and why he's one of the best dirt racers. He is going for his 3rd overall Chili Bowl Nationals win, and he's going to have the chance and opportunity to go get it done. Also, Shane Golobic was able to finish 2nd in the main, so he's also locked into the A main as well. Congratulations, Shane, one of the best dirt racers as well. Shane had a really fast car tonight. I think he's going to have a good chance and opportunity to win overall. But I also want to shout out Brent Cruz. Brent Cruz crashed in his qualifier and had to go all the way from the C main and started in last. He went from last in the C main and finished in 4th place overall tonight. This young man is going to be something special in NASCAR competition. Brent Cruz is an incredible young talent, and I think that Brent has a lot of potential to be one of the best young drivers we've seen in the NASCAR sport. To finish 4th, absolutely incredible. But once again, congratulations to Kyle Larson on picking up the win on prelim night Monday. A well-deserved win, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jacob Abel. As it was announced early this morning that Jacob Abel will go full-time with Daytona Racing in IndyCar in 2025, driving the number 51 car. Now, Jacob Abel, for those who don't know, has been competing in Indy NXT and almost won the championship this year in 2024, and also nearly made some starts in IndyCar in 2024 as well, but did not end up making starts. I'm going to be honest, this one is a little bit of a surprise for me. I thought maybe Rinus VeeKay was going to be the driver full-time, and there is still a chance that Rinus VeeKay could end up driving the number 18 full-time, but it sounds like that 18 could be a rotation seat. I think Jacob Abel is a very talented driver, however, and I think he does have a lot of potential to be really strong in 2025 with this team. Foy Racing is a team in 2024 that had a lot of different drivers. Toby Sowery made some starts with the team. They got a driver out of retirement who hadn't raced in a couple years. Catherine Legge made quite a few starts near the end of the season. Among many other big names, they got opportunities, and now they've got a full-time driver. And that's one thing I will say for Dale Coyne is they've got a driver that's going to provide a lot of stability for 2025 because Jacob Abel does have a lot of funding and sponsorship. I think the Abel family will be helping out. Of course, they'll be focused on Indy NXT in 2025, but I think that Jacob Abel will have a solid year with the team. I think this team is going to show some great pace and speed, and I really look for Jacob Abel to have a really strong and great year with the team in the season. Looking forward to see what he can do in 2025 with the Dale Coyne Racing team. I think he's going to be strong, fast, and competitive. I don't see him winning a race this year, but I think he could have some good pace and pretty strong speed in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Daytona 500. As there were a couple pretty big announcements surrounding the Daytona 500 for 2025 and also 2026. First, it was officially announced today that the 2025 Daytona 500 has officially sold out 34 days away or 33 days away from the Daytona 500. This is a little bit later than the last year. I think the 2024 Daytona 500 has sold out in the middle of November. This one took until the middle of January to get finally sold out, but still a major win. I believe this is the 10th consecutive year in a row that the Daytona 500 has been able to sell out. The Daytona 500 is always the biggest event for NASCAR overall. I know that Fox has not done a really good job treating the event with the respect that I truly think it deserves, but I'm glad to see the fans still really care about the Daytona 500. I know the Super Speedway Racing's also had a lot of questions about how good the racing is, but regardless how you feel about it, it's good to see the Daytona 500 sell out, and a lot of people are going to be there to enjoy it. I'd love to go to the Daytona 500 in the future. Maybe 2026 might be a chance for me to get out there at one point, but congratulations, Daytona 500 selling out for this year. As for the 2026 Daytona 500, the day has been officially set. It'll be on February 15th, 2026. This is the first scheduled silly season announcement that has been officially confirmed for the 2026 year. This has been expected. It will be on President's Day weekend. This will be the earliest the Daytona 500 has been in a very, very long time, maybe since like 2018 or 2019, and now it's going to move a little bit earlier in the year, which means that 2026 we could have the season technically end. If the season ends the way it's going, we could have the season end in late October, on October 30th or October 31st, which should be the goal in my opinion, to try to end the season a little bit earlier. But glad to see the Daytona 500 has been officially announced for 2026. There is a chance they could be headed to Sao Paulo for 2026 as well for the Clash. We'll have to wait and see on that. But we're starting to get some scheduled announcements for 2026, which I think is a big positive step. Good to see that the 2026 Daytona 500 has also been officially announced for the upcoming year and season, and also for 2026 as well. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Viking Motorsports. As Viking Motorsports earlier today on Twitter updated their Twitter banner for the 2025 season with their name and what the team is going to be named once again for 2025. Just like 2024, the team will once again be called Viking Motorsports. Now, we kind of had an indication on what their 2025 plans are going to be. Viking Motorsports will not be associated with RSS Racing in 2025. Matt DiBenedetto is once again going to be the driver of this program like he was for majority of 2024. And we are expecting that they'll be switching manufacturers from Ford to Chevrolet in 2025, with them getting an ECR Alliance and a Richard Childress Racing Alliance as well. This team in 2024 showed a lot of promise, and also they will be switching numbers from number 38 to number 99 this upcoming year. I think Viking Motorsports is one of the teams that did surprise me in a pretty big way in 2024. I think that Matt DiBenedetto had some really strong runs with this program, and this team showed a lot of potential this past year. And I think 2025 could be a pretty big year for the program. They're building it up very naturally. They're growing. They're going to have a new shop in 2025, and they're moving into North Carolina as well. Kind of like how Foy Racing is doing for the upcoming years. They're moving to Statesville, North Carolina as well. But I think Viking Motorsports is a team that showed a lot of potential with Matt DiBenedetto. Now, the field is going to be extremely competitive in 2025, so I'm not expecting Matt DiBenedetto to make the playoffs this upcoming year, but I could see Matt DiBenedetto finishing top 20 in the points, and I could see Matt DiBenedetto getting top 10s like he did in 2024, because ECR and RCR cars generally run really good at super speedways, and Matt DiBenedetto is a pretty underrated super speedway racer, so I could definitely see him going out there and winning a super speedway race in 2025. I'm excited about this for Viking. This team has really set themselves up for a really bright future, and I think the team has a lot of potential to really grow and develop. Excited to see what they can do in 2025, and glad to see he'll be back for this year with Matt DiBenedetto behind the wheel of the car for 2025 in Xfinity Series competition, though the competition is going to be strong with guys like Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, Connor Zilish, Carson Quaffle, you name it, guys like of course, Taylor Gray, and other people like William Swalsh and Christian Eckes, Nick Sanchez, but I think Viking's got a lot of potential in 2025. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about James Hinchliff. As there was a report by Nathan Brown from the Indy Star earlier this evening that James Hinchliff has officially finalized a deal with Fox to be a commentator for 2025. He's the first official piece that has been officially confirmed for Fox Sports for 2025. Hinchcliff's name has been mentioned as a really big possibility for to go to Fox in 2025, but nothing had been officially confirmed. This is a really good decision to bring him up in the broadcast booth. James Hinchliff has done an exceptional job with NBC over the course of the last couple of years since replacing Paul Tracy at the end of 2021. I think that James Hinchliff has been better than Paul Tracy and brings a lot of insight to the table, especially with someone who is still competing in motorsports as he does compete and ends up part-time with FAF, and I think he's going to run with the team again in the 2025 Rolex 24. I think Hinchliff has done an incredible job. He knows how to commentate motorsports, and I think he's going to continue doing great things with the Fox team for 2025. We're still waiting on some other big announcement for the Fox Sports booth for IndyCar. Will Buxton is the lead candidate to be the lead announcer for 2025, and while nothing's been confirmed, I'd also expect Townsend Bell to probably be in the booth in 2025. We're still waiting on pit reporters. Jamie Little's been mentioned as a potential possibility. Ryan Hunter-Reay's name's been linked to being the lead pit reporter for the upcoming year, so we'll have to wait to see there. But going back to James Hinchliff, this is a no-brainer move. James Hinchliff does a really good job in the broadcast booth every time, and I think he's going to continue bringing a lot to the table for the broadcast in 2025 like he's done the last couple of years. He's going to help the Fox booth, especially. I know IndyCar is really playing a role in Indianapolis Motor Speedway, is really helping making decisions on who's going to be in these booths. Fox wants to bring some of their on-air talent in, but I think that IndyCar wants to also have their on-air talent in more than Fox. So we'll see who ends up getting in the booth for the rest of the group. But again, very happy and glad to see that James Hinchliff has been finally confirmed, and I think he's going to do a really good job being with Fox Sports in 2025. Looking forward to see what he can do in 2025 in the booth like he's been the last couple years and seasons. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Nice Motorsports. As Phil Gold, who will be the crew chief for Kane Honeycutt in 2025, was on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio and revealed some very interesting information heading into 2025 with the program. It sounds like Nice Motorsports will likely field a fourth part-time truck in 2025. Nice has already announced 3 of their 4 trucks for the 2025 season. Matt Mills will be back behind the wheel of the number 42 truck. Christian Rose will join the program after being with AM Racing the last couple of years. He will join Nice Motorsports to drive the number 44 for the team, while Kane Honeycutt will go full-time in the number 45, with, of course, Phil Gold being the crew chief. Now, we don't really know what's going on with Bailey Kerr. We'll talk about that in just a second, but if they do run a 4 part-time truck, it will most likely be the number 41. 41, which is the number that Nice Motorsports has used for the last couple of years. It sounds like, according to Phil Gold, that Ros Chen is going to make a few select starts with Nice Motorsports. Makes a lot of sense, in my opinion. Ros Chen has done a really good job with Nice. He got a win for the team at Darlington in 2024 and showed a lot of speed with the program, though I think Phil Gold really played a part in that, but also Ros Chen always gets the best out of equipment. He got one of the only wins that they got in 2025. As for Bailey Currey, his future is in question. Joseph Wrigley has confirmed something that I have heard, that Bailey Currey is not expected to be back full-time with Nice Motorsports in 2025. Now, there is a chance and possibility, since Bailey Currey's been put in a lot of the Nice Motorsports posts, there's a really good chance and possibility that Bailey Currey could be part-time with the program in 2025, but I think it'd be really cool if he got an opportunity to be full-time with this team. I'd rather see him in the truck full-time than Christian Rose. I do understand why Christian Rose is getting chosen over Bailey Currey for the full-time seat. However, considering the fact that Christian Rose is bringing a pretty solid budget for 2025, while Bailey Currey doesn't really have a full budget, and a lot of the sponsors that Bailey Currey does have are coming from the Nice Motorsports team. But I think talent-wise, Bailey Currey is a much more talented driver. And there's some other drivers who could drive the 41 truck also in 2025. We could see SVG make a few truck starts with the team. We could see some other drivers come out of the woodwork and make starts like Johnny Sauter made in 2024. I think it's going to be interesting to see who gets behind the wheel. But it looks like Bailey Currey, unfortunately, will not be full-time with the program. I'd rather see him full-time, but he will not be full-time with the program in 2025, and their full-time drivers are officially confirmed for 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tom Brady and Jimmie Johnson. Now, this story I kind of touched on in the most recent video yesterday. If you haven't checked it out, I suggest going to check it out. But I got facts wrong on this story. According to Adam Stern, Tom Brady and Jimmie Johnson are expected to join forces to be co-owners alongside Chip Ganassi of a fourth entry for the 2025 Indianapolis 500. Originally, I had said that Jimmie Johnson was going to be the driver. That was not correct. According to Tony Donahue, it sounds like Sebastian Bourdais will be the driver of this fourth car for Chip Ganassi Racing in the 2025 Indianapolis 500. First of all, for those who don't know, Sebastian Bourdais is one of the greatest drivers in IndyCar history, four-time Champ Car champion from 2004 up until the end of 2007 when the series pretty much disbanded, and also has won a lot of IndyCar races when he joined IRL when it was IRL back in 2008. Sebastian Bourdais also driven for Chip Ganassi Racing in IMSA over the last couple of years and has had quite a bit of success, including leading the team to a couple victories in IMSA. I think Sebastian Bourdais makes a ton of sense to get an opportunity with Chip Ganassi Racing. And I think of how fast we've seen Sebastian Bourdais be and how quick he can get equipment up to speed, I could see Sebastian Bourdais having a really good chance and opportunity to win the 2025 Indy 500. Scott Dixon's almost won the last couple of years, same at Alex Palou. I think that there's a good chance Sebastian Bourdais, if he can make it in, which I think they're going to have a good chance to make it in on speed, I think Bourdais can easily win. As for Tom Brady and Jimmie Johnson teaming up, it makes a lot of sense. I think that we saw Tom Brady on the IndyCar advertisement, and I think Tom Brady and Jimmie Johnson teaming up, two of the greatest drivers in two of the greatest people in sports as a whole, getting the chance and opportunity to team up in 2025, to me is honestly really, really cool. I think that Tom Brady and Jimmie Johnson are two of the GOATs of their respective sports and are two of the best ever. And I think that seeing these two team up, like I said, is really honestly awesome or really cool. Now, Tom Brady's had association with motorsports. Obviously, Tom Brady was working with the Jota Hertz team in the World Endurance Championship in 2024. I don't know if he's still going to be back with that program in 2025 with change of this manufacturer for this season. But I think, like I said, it's really cool to see that Tom Brady and Jimmie Johnson are going to be teaming up in 2025, if it's true, which I do trust Tony Donahue on that front. But I think it's pretty exciting that Tom Brady is going to be getting involved in IndyCar and working with Jimmie Johnson in 2025 to field a car for Sebastian Bourdais this upcoming year and season. Really looking forward to this partnership to be starting in 2025 for the 2025 Indianapolis 500. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Helio Castroneves once again. Now, we already talked about the fact a couple days ago that Helio Castroneves has been officially locked in to the 2025 Daytona 500. He will drive the number 91 car for Trackhouse Racing, also known as a Project 91 entry. And earlier today, Bob Pockrass wanted to clear something up and clarify and spoke to NASCAR officials on what the plans for Helio Castroneves is. According to Bob Pockrass, if Helio qualifies through the duels or makes it in as one of the top 2 qualifiers at Daytona and is one of the 2 fastest cars on qualifying on Wednesday, there will only be 40 cars in the field. The only way the 41st car will show up in the Daytona 500 in 2025 is Helio doesn't have the speed to make it in from the top 2 fastest cars in the field on Wednesday or doesn't get in through the duels. Meaning that if that does end up taking place, there will be 41 cars in this year's Daytona 500. If not, only 40 cars will show up. I think a lot of fans are going to be begging, and some are going to be hoping that Helio does not have the speed to make it in on Wednesday, or they're hoping that he isn't able to get in for the duels, so we can have a 41st entry. Plus, you could have other guys that get guaranteed in, like a Mark Truex Jr., who's expected to drive the Tricon Garage entry. We are, of course, expecting Tricon to field the car for Mark Truex Jr. in this year's Daytona 500. Same with Jimmy Johnson, who's expected to drive for Legacy Motor Club in this year's Daytona 500, and some other rides like NY Racing Machine for JJ Yeley, and of course MBM, who we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit. Kaulig is not expected to field the car in the Daytona 500. But I will say, after reading into it, I think that people are kind of overreacting to the Helio Castroneves story. I get that you don't want a driver being guaranteed in the event, and it does lose some of its luster when you have a big name like Helio Castroneves being guaranteed in, while other drivers like Jimmy Johnson and Mark Truex Jr. are going to have to fight their race way in. But I think this open exemption clause that is going to be going into effect in 2025, I really don't think it's going to be used that frequently in this upcoming year. In fact, the only other race in 2025 that I may end up seeing it, or we might all end up seeing, is a race at Mexico City. But other than that, I don't think it's going to be coming into effect too much. And remember, you have to have it done in 90 days. You're not going to see like 2 at the same time because they're only going to be allowing 1 per race. And again, I don't think it's going to be a super common thing. But I think we're all happy that Helio will get to race in this year's Daytona 500, get to race against some of the top drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series, like Kyle Busch, like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Bubba Wallace, Brad Keselowski, Alex Bowman, William Byron, the defending winner, Chase Elliott. You name it. Guy said Brad Keselowski, Tyler Reddick, Chris Buescher, Christopher Bell. You name it. All these big names are going to get to run in the Daytona 500 like they've always been. And I think Helio being in the Daytona 500 is cool. Again, I completely understand why fans don't want a driver to be guaranteed or locked into the event. But like I said, at the same token and same time, I really don't have a major issue with Helio making the Daytona 500 locked in as much as some do. I don't think it's going to be a common thing over the next 2 years, and I don't think it's going to be something that we're going to see all the time. Again, I'm happy that Helio will get to race. I get why fans are upset about it, but I'm glad to see there's some clarification on that front on why Helio's locked in, regardless if he gets in on speed, and then will only be used if he doesn't make it in on speed or if he doesn't make it through the duels. We'll see what happens, though, and how things play out in the Daytona 500, which is about a month away from now. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Conor Jones. Now, earlier today, it was reported by Joseph Straley from TobyDiscRissi.com that if you look at the ThorSport Racing website, you probably noticed that they are starting to put out their potential drivers for 2025. Jake Garcia is back behind the wheel of the number 13 truck once again, it looks like, for 2025. Matt Crafton's back in the number 88. Ben Rhodes back in the 99. And Ty Majeski in the number 98. But if you take a look at the website, you probably notice that Conor Jones is not listed as the driver of the number 66 truck for ThorSport Racing in 2025 and currently is listed as to be determined. This indicates to me that it sounds very likely that Conor Jones will very likely not be returning to ThorSport Racing in 2025. This is definitely a really huge story because if I'm not mistaken, at the beginning of 2024 or even in 2023, Conor Jones has signed a multi-year contract with ThorSport Racing and was supposed to be full-time with this program in 2025 in the number 66 truck. So what happened? Well, I think it all has to do with the driver named Conor Jones. Conor Jones in 2024 made a fool for himself on the racetrack. He basically just gave up on his team throughout the year, made a lot of mistakes, acted like a spoiled brat on the racetrack, and I think the thing that kind of sent it away from having a chance and opportunity to be full-time with the team is what happened at Homestead Miami Speedway. He he immediately and intentionally wrecked Matt Mills going into turn number 3 at Homestead Miami Speedway during the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race, and then threw a temper tantrum on the radio getting mad at Matt Mills. Meanwhile, he got a 2-lap penalty, and Matt Mills got sent to the hospital. Most of the industry, including many drivers in the industry, were very, very fed up and really, really angry with Conor Jones. And a lot of people noted this is not the first time that Conor Jones has shown his antics on the track. Meanwhile, after the season had concluded at Phoenix Raceway after suspension, he got into his teammate Jake Garcia and got into an incident after the race and continued to ram in the back of the number 13 truck, despite the fact that Conor Jones was the one who caused an incident on the racetrack that took him out of contention in the event. And then he got into a big crash that took place in the offseason, a race I think that Dale Jr. was competing in at the South Carolina 400 in Florence. He got into a fight, and multiple people, like Mason Diaz, were very, very happy with the things that Conor Jones was doing. Conor Jones is a driver that has a really, really bad reputation, especially for someone that's 18 years old. When you have a reputation like we've heard about Conor Jones, that is never a good sign. Conor Jones is a driver that I really don't think has the talent to be in a top-level ride with the way he drives in races. We all talk about Carson Osbar and the lack of driving standards from him at times. But Carson Osbar, say what you want to say, yes, he's over-aggressive at points, there's no denying it, but Carson Osbar has been able to back it up with talent. He got 4 truck wins in 2023 and won the Rookie of the Year in 2024, and I think he could be a driver that could get a win with Spire Motorsports in 2025. We have not seen that from Conor Jones, and I just don't feel like Conor Jones was ready for a top-level C like Thorsport Racing. I do get that Thorsport Racing has really, really struggled in the last year or so, but Conor Jones was struggling in that equipment. He was worse than Hailie Deegan was, and Hailie Deegan just did not run good with Thorsport Racing. So if your stats are generally worse than Hailie Deegan's, you're definitely the problem at the team. So I think it was the right decision to cut him off the team and the program in 2025. As for his potential replacement, I would love to see Luke Fenhouse be the driver of this truck. If not, maybe Kaz Gralla could be a potential candidate, which I think Kaz would be a great driver to be behind the wheel. But I think Luke Fenhouse, especially since he drove that 66 truck in a couple races and drove for the team part-time and got multiple top 10s, it would make more sense to put him behind the wheel of this scene than it would be for a guy like Conor Jones or Kaz Gralla. And Jake Garcia is expected to be back with this team, of course, like I've already mentioned. Jake Garcia, I think he's a talented driver, but he did not have a good year in 2024. He ran about as bad as Hailie Deegan did in that truck. He did get a couple top 10s and only had 2 places of an average finish better, but he just never ran up front that much and really, really struggled. But again, going back to Conor Jones, actions do have consequences, and if you do something stupid on the racetrack, there's a really good chance you're going to lose your seat and rides. And I really hope Conor Jones cleans it up going forward if he wants to stay in NASCAR long term, because teams are not going to put up with it, especially for someone who's 18 years old. I don't care how young you are, you're racing in the series. You can't intentionally wreck people. You can't do stupid stuff. Otherwise, you're most likely to lose your opportunities, and unfortunately, because of this, Conor Jones is not going to be back with the team this upcoming year, which is a shame for him, but it's not a shame, I think, for most fans, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Kurt Busch. As it was first reported by the racing experts Jonathan Feld that Kurt Busch has been officially medically cleared by doctors to return to racing in 2025. He will race in the Race of Champions event in the next couple months and will be teammates with Travis Pastrana in Sydney, Australia, running the Race of Champions event. This is absolutely huge news. Kurt Busch, obviously, we all know what happened a couple years ago in 2022. Kurt Busch, of course, at a time, was driving the number 45 car for 23XI Racing full-time for the team and was attempted to qualify, and he actually made the final round of qualifying at Pocono Raceway with his teammate Bubba Wallace. Unfortunately, as it got to the second round qualifying, Kurt Busch had a really, really bad crash going down into turn number 3 and hit the outside wall and got a ton of damage on the car. Because of the damage he had on the outside car and basically the back of the car at the time, not really have any crush or crumple zones, Kurt Busch suffered concussion-like symptoms after other wrecks that took place throughout the year at Atlanta Motor Speedway a few weeks ago, and a couple of their big wrecks that took place throughout 2022. Kurt Busch would unfortunately end up missing the rest of 2022 and would not come back in 2023 at the start of the year. He tried to make a comeback in 2023 to return to NASCAR Cup competition, but inevitably at Daytona National Speedway, basically in August going into the playoffs, Kurt Busch would formally announce his retirement from racing. Now, Kurt Busch never ruled out the possibility of coming back to racing as a whole, but if he ever wanted to come back to racing as a whole, he would have to be medically cleared by doctors for it to happen. And finally, Kurt Busch has been officially medically cleared to come back. Now, as of right now, it was noted in the article that he does not have any NASCAR plans at this point for 2025, but I would have to think, especially down the road, maybe in the later portion of this season, especially that 23XI Racing is going to have a fourth car in 2025, most likely, even though they're going to be in the lawsuit and stuff, we're expecting Corey Hatton to drive that car. I would have to think down the road, Kurt Busch could make a start or two in 2025 with 23XI Racing. Now, I think he would have to get cleared by NASCAR as well to get back behind the wheel, but I also have to think Kurt Busch would be good to go on that front as well. Kurt Busch has had a very interesting journey over the course of the last couple of years. I'm not going to get into everything that's happened, but Kurt's been doing a much better job for himself, and it seems like he's on really good terms currently at the moment right now. If Kurt Busch ever wants to come back to NASCAR, I think he'd be welcomed with open arms. Kurt Busch is one of the greatest NASCAR drivers of all time and one of the most underrated drivers in NASCAR Cup history. In my opinion, he is without question a first ballot Hall of Famer. 35 or 36 career NASCAR Cup Series victories, Daytona 500 win in 2017. He, of course, has a NASCAR Cup Series championship in 2004. He's won the Coke 600 back in 2010, and he's been very competitive through many years and won with many different teams and organizations, like Roush, like, of course, teams like Team Penske in the 2000s going into the early 2010s. He almost won with Phoenix Racing. How Furniture Racing really flourished and developed into a pretty solid team that led to the team's long-term success for a few years after he left in 2013. Then he went to Stewart-Haas Racing and won races pretty much every single year from 2014 till he inevitably left in 2019 to join up with Chip Ganassi Racing, where he won at least one race every year from 2019 to 2021. And then he went to 23XI Racing, got that really emotional win at Kansas Speedway, one of the best races Kurt put together in recent years. A very dominant win for him, getting by Kyle Larson late. And I think that Kurt Busch, it'd be really fun for him to get the chance and opportunity to come back to NASCAR. And I think it'd be cool for him to come back and do a one-off. I don't think he'll run a super speedway if he ever comes back in races. I don't think he'll ever end up driving like a bigger oval. I think most likely a short track would be the most likely option. Plus, we know Kurt Busch is really good at short tracks, especially one of the best short track racers, especially like Bristol, right? He's really good at Bristol. So that'd be a really good track for him to definitely come back. But again, it's really good nonetheless to see that Kurt Busch is coming back to racing and doing some racing in 2025. Again, I would definitely love to see Kurt Busch come and race in NASCAR once again in 2025 and get that chance and opportunity. But if he doesn't come back in 2025, it is what it is, but seeing him be medically cleared and seeing him good to go, it's a really good story to see. And I'm just, like I said, very happy and glad to see that Kurt Busch is coming back to racing in some form or some sort of capacity in 2025. I think that regardless of what he ends up doing, he's going to be competitive. Now, if Kurt Busch was to return to NASCAR, I think he's 47 this year, so he's a little bit older driver. But again, I'd love to see him come back and do one off, like along with the guy Carl Edwards, maybe down the road, maybe Eric Almirola in a 2011 car would be really cool too. But I think it's cool nonetheless because, like I said, they're going to be a 42011 racing car at some point. Glad to see that Kurt Busch has been officially medically cleared, and glad to see he will be getting back to racing in some sort of capacity in 2025. Looking forward to see what he can do in 2025 in whatever series he ends up driving for this year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Mike Wallace. As it was shockingly announced earlier this evening, a couple of hours ago, that Mike Wallace has been officially disqualified from attempting the 2025 Daytona 500 and will not run the 2025 Daytona 500. Remember, it was announced a couple weeks ago that Mike Wallace had been officially approved to run the 2025 Daytona 500 with MBM Motorsports in the number 66 car. And a few weeks ago, Mike Wallace had spoken to many people in the industry, including Steve Phelps and Brett Bodine, and was told by them that he was good to go to race in the Daytona 500. However, Kenny Wallace had basically told him that Ellen Sawyer had come back to Mike Wallace and told him that he would not be eligible to run the 2025 Daytona 500 and was disqualified. Mike had asked Elton why he was not getting the chance and opportunity. Elton pretty much explained because of the lack of activity in the sport and the fact of the competitive side of things being a major reason for that. Now, MBM Motorsports did put out a statement earlier tonight confirming the news as well. They are still looking to run the 2025 Daytona 500. They are devastated and they feel bad for Mike, and they're devastated of not having Mike get the chance and opportunity. Mike, I think, wrote actually a really good statement as well on his Facebook page. I suggest going and checking it out. And they're still looking for someone to be funded. And we'll get to a driver who I think could get behind the wheel of that car in the future. What I have a little bit of an issue with here is not the fact that Mike Wallace did not get approved to run. Look, Mike Wallace is 65 years old and will turn 66 in later portion of 2025. Had Mike Wallace been approved to run the Daytona 500 and actually made the Daytona 500 this year, Mike would have been the second oldest driver to make the Daytona 500 behind Mark Thompson. The thing is, Mike Wallace has not competed on an oval in a decade. The last time he competed on an oval was, of course, the 2015 Daytona 500, when I think he drove for the number 66 car in that event and actually made the Daytona 500 and showed some really good pace and really strong speed throughout Speed Weeks, which was very, very impressive. Now, I don't think that Mike Wallace is a bad super speedway racer. Mike Wallace, of course, won a Daytona in the Truck Series in 2000. He also won an ARCA race, I think, for Ken Schrader's team, and also picked up a Truck Series win at Talladega in 2011 for Kevin Harvick Incorporated. I don't think that it would have been the issue there for me. But again, it's been nearly a decade, and he's only made 2 starts since then, and both of them have been on road courses. Had Mike Wallace been asking to do road courses, maybe he had a chance, but also the fact that it was 5 years since inactivity probably played a role in that. I think age definitely played a little bit of a role. But people say, what about Mark Thompson? What about people like Derek Koch? Mark Thompson, yes, was 66 years old when he got approved to run the Daytona 500, but he made his start at Talladega, and he'd been running ARCA races at Talladega and Daytona with MBM Motorsports in the number 66 team then. So Mark Thompson got approved because of that. And then some people bring up Helio Castroneves and him being approved while Mike Wallace isn't. Well, Helio Castroneves is a 4-time Indianapolis 500 winner, and Helio was been competitive and been really strong at ovals in the past. So I think that's why he got approved over someone like a Mike Wallace. My big issue is the lack of communication from both sides. How come is it that a few weeks ago we were told that Mike Wallace was officially approved to run the Daytona 500, but then all of a sudden, a couple weeks later, and only about a month away from the Daytona 500, he's all of a sudden not approved? That doesn't really make sense to me, in my opinion. I completely understand why NASCAR made the decision that they made. It definitely makes sense why they made that decision. But I also do understand why fans are really frustrated because of the communication issues. I think there definitely was some sort of communication breakdown that took place here. I think mistakes were made maybe on both parts. Maybe MBM Motorsports may have jumped the gun, but I think they had thought, hey, he's good to go and he's approved to run. We've been told by them he's going to be good to go. Brett Bodine told them. So like I said, how come is it the fact that Mike Wallace was approved to run the Daytona 500, but now he's not approved to run? That doesn't make sense to me. Again, I know there's been people that had some questions. I have to think because apparently they've changed the approval system. Tommy Joe Martins was told he couldn't run any NASCAR Cup Series race, despite the fact that Tommy Joe has made starts in Xfinity, has been a pretty respectful driver in Xfinity competition. So we've had issues on that, and they're changing up requirements on who can get in and who cannot inevitably get in because they don't want fields to be slow. They want the most competitive fields that they can have on the racetrack. So with Mike Wallace not being approved, what does this mean for MBM Motorsports? Well, MBM's going to have to go back to the drawing board, and they're going to have to find someone with funding. I was kind of talking about this in the original video, but I would think that someone like a Shawnee creator, Sam Mayer, would be 2 decent candidates to get behind the wheel at this point, right? I think they're going to look for some people with funding, and both those drivers do have funding. If they don't get to the 15 car for Rick Ware, which we think that Rick Ware is going to be fielding a second car in this year's Daytona 500, maybe they go with him. Maybe they go with Corey LaJoie. Corey LaJoie doesn't have a ride currently at the moment for 2025. I could see him being a candidate for that number 66 car. It's not the most competitive ride, but LaJoie is a pretty solid super speedway racer. So I think that Corey LaJoie would not be a bad candidate if he doesn't go to Rick Rowe Racing this year, which it sounds very unlikely at this point. I just feel like that there needs to be better communication on both sides. I think that Mike Wallace and the team maybe should have waited a little bit longer to announce this stuff, especially since he put the announcement out today that he had been approved and good to go by NASCAR. Then all of a sudden, a few hours later, after the Facebook post, and I have to think the Facebook post probably played a little bit of role, the original one that he put up, probably NASCAR saying, hey, we've seen the backlash from the fans, you're a lot older driver, we probably shouldn't have you out on the racetrack, especially at your age, is probably what they're thinking. But then again, you have drivers who are a lot older getting behind the wheel. I think the competitive stuff just doesn't make sense to me. I get they want as much a competitive field as possible, but you've got people in the field like Cody Ware, who's going to be full-time in the series, who probably shouldn't be out there full-time, if I'm going to be honest. So, yeah, I think there's definitely some questions about this for sure. I do have a few things that I kind of feel bad. I feel bad for MBM too, because for them to basically have everything set in stone and ready to go for the Daytona 500, and now they've got a driver that is disqualified, and it's because of the communication issues. I feel bad for MBM. They thought they were set. They thought they were good to go. And I feel like Carl Long's been kind of screwed over for many, many years, and I think there's definitely some frustration on that part over there. But I do understand NASCAR's decision to not have Mike Wallace racing. I think if a driver hadn't been in the sport for 5 years racing, because they were suspended at one point a couple years ago and they couldn't race, even though Mike could have come back in 2021. Had Mike been in more recently, I think he would have been approved to run the Daytona 500, but because he hasn't raced in NASCAR in a few years, I think that's a big reason why he unfortunately was not allowed to run it. Disappointing news overall if you're a fan of NBM Motorsports and Mike Wallace, and disappointing to see that this is going on, in my honest opinion. So, that is good for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. How disappointed you see that Mike Wallace is not running the Daytona 500 has been disqualified? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. And what thoughts about Kurt Busch being medically cleared to return to racing? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. If there's any other major news that does break on the channel, we'll discuss here live on the channel today. If not, there might be another NASCAR news video dropping Wednesday, or if not, will probably be the Haas Factory team preview. Thursday, there could be a NASCAR news video dropping, same with Friday, as more news is expected to come out this week. We've got content on people like Haley Diggins, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch again, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, The Lawsuit, Chandler Smith, Eric Almirola, Sam Mayer, Sheldon Creed, Connor Zilic, you name it. Doorsport with Conor Jones, Jake Garcia, other big name drivers we'll be talking about as we get close to the start of the year and season. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.